It's time for Barrage the Farage, where audience members who have been selected get up to ask their questions. I know their names, I've no idea what their questions are. Let's start with Dan. Dan, what is your question?
Good evening, Nigel.
Good evening.
In light of what's gone on with mobile phones in the chambers of Parliament recently, do you think it's time to ban the use of mobile phones in the chambers itself?
It's a really good question, and if you watch MPs now, they're constantly on their phones. If you go to the Welsh Assembly, they've got laptops up on their desks. I don't want to be a hypocrite about this, because when I sat in the European Parliament, at times I was so bored, without a mobile phone, God knows what I'd have done. That's when they weren't throwing things at me. Do you know what? Realistically, in the modern age, it isn't going to happen. I'm afraid we live in an information technology age. It just isn't going to happen. But I get your point, because the way it should work is you listen to reasoned debate. You listen to argument on both sides, and maybe a good argument can change your point of view. So I get why you asked the question, but you know what? It ain't going to happen. No, afraid not, but thank you. Next up is Lee. Lee Larkfield is next up. Good evening.
Thank you for Brexit.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Thank Medway.
Because of all the sleaze and the scandal and the lies that are in our current government, do you think it would be better if MPs would have had a real job rather than coming from the elite of Oxbridge and Cambridge?
Yes. Look, I think you need some academics. I think there is room in Parliament for some people who are academics. But when you have academics like Kwasi Kwarteng, who's in charge of energy, who thinks it's better to import natural gas from all over the world than produce our own in this country, provide tens of thousands of well-paid jobs to men and women, then I think you need some people in there with some business experience, with some real-life experience. I wouldn't have a problem if the average age of our MPs went up by 10 or 15 years, but we got more men and women from both parties who'd had jobs in the real world. I agree 100%. Absolutely. I really do. OK, let's go to Linda Vincent.
Oh.
Hi, Linda.
Yeah, good evening, Nigel. I'm a great supporter of you and Brexit, but lately I understand that this government is not doing what they promised on controlling immigration and all the green energy stuff and cost of living. But my question is, if we keep government down, we will end up with a Labour government and maybe a two-party government. And that would be worse, I believe, for this country on controlling immigration and green energy. We would be in a worse state, I feel.
Well,
how do we get through to this government without causing us to score a home goal if Labour get into power?
Well, Linda, the point is that the Brexit voting public, who in the end got sick of Theresa May, and I think, what the Brexit Party did in areas like this, got rid of May. Johnson came in. Controlling our borders was one of the main planks of Brexit. When people see what's happening in the English Channel, they are absolutely enraged by it. We get promise after promise made and no delivery. Yeah. Interestingly, public opinion now trusts Labour on immigration more than the Conservatives.
Wow.
No, but it does. But it does. It seems incredible. Look, all I would say is this. Starmer is not Jeremy Corbyn.
Right.
He is not the extreme left. In fact, actually, in terms of many policies, I doubt his policies would be that much different to Boris Johnson's. Okay. So much as Boris Johnson moved to the social democratic centre. But he won't be able to govern alone, and it will have to be a coalition, I guess, with the SNP and the Liberals. Whether it's better or whether it's worse, you've got your own view.
Yeah.
But the fact is, people voted for a Conservative government. Yeah. It's about time, in terms of their relationship with small business, in terms of keeping Brexit promises, in terms of controlling the borders. It's about time they started fulfilling the promise that got so many to vote for them in 2019. And if they do, I'll be the first to praise them. Okay. All right, thank you. Let us go to Danny. Danny, I love it. Magnificent. Magnificent. You asking a question or singing?
What would you like, Nigel?
A question or two.
Good evening. Quite simple and straightforward. Yep. What are your views on renationalisation of core British industries, such as the energy sector, railways, so on and so forth?
Look, I generally think that when governments own things and run things, they do it quite badly. But I do think selling off strategic resources to Chinese companies or French companies or companies that have no essential national interest in this country and how it's run is a mistake. And I think I supported privatisation, but I think it went too far. And I think to have the Chinese Communist Party involved in building a nuclear power station down in the West Country is absolutely nuts. I'd rather the government did that than the Chinese government. All right, OK. Two more. Let's get Robert. Robert McCann.
Good evening, Nigel.
Good evening.
I know you like to come to these places to talk about local issues, but I feel I must ask your opinion about Putin.
Yep.
I think he's deceived the world with his build-up of all the troops that were supposedly on exercises, and now he's into Ukraine. He cannot be trusted to stick to his word. Why are we even trying to negotiate with him?
Well, look, I thought, I have to say, I thought 10 years ago that Putin was really clever, really smart. I now think he's lost it. I'm not even sure that he's rational now in what he's doing, and that is very, very scary in many ways. We have to be sensible. We have to make sure that there's still a way out for him.
Yes.
And I think to threaten him with the International Criminal Court actually was an error. I think what he's doing is reprehensible, absolutely, in every single way. And the truth is we're not negotiating with him. And I have to say, it amazes me. I promise you this, if Trump was in the White House, I doubt he'd have done any of this. But I'm convinced it needs a Trump or somebody to go and talk to Putin, to fly to Moscow and talk to Putin, to say, look, we want peace. Because at the moment, all I see is an escalation of rhetoric and arms on both sides of this debate. So I actually think we should be trying to talk to him. It may be impossible, but you know what? Churchill once said, jaw is better than war. We need to try a bit harder, in my opinion.
Thank you.
OK, and the last question is Lorraine. Lorraine, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay. Do you think that the average working person would be better paid weekly? Because if you run out of money on Wednesday, you only have to wait a couple of days before you get paid. Whereas if you run out of money on the 15th of the month, you would need to borrow money to survive.
To be honest with you, I'm going to be honest with you, I never thought of that especially. But people did used to get weekly pay packets, didn't they? And they used to get, in fact, going back a few years, they got weekly pay packets in cash, the tax had been deducted, and that was how it worked. Quite honestly, given the digital world that we're in and the way that payments proceed, it would be just as easy for companies to set up weekly payments as it is to set up monthly payments. It wouldn't cost them any more money. And I think, Lorraine, it's a very interesting idea.